shift into gear and start. And this is what we are going to restore in this episode. Oh wait, no. It is what we are going to assemble in this episode. Miniature scale model of the Nissan GT-R R34 electric RC car. So, in order to make this assembly more perfect, the model master with rich restoration experience, Westovation, Kamasushashuj, will go beyond the regular assembly and integrate more and richer elements into this GT-R. For example, here, he tinted the warning lights on the side of the vehicle. Speaking of the biggest difference between assembly and restoration, restoration involves dismantling, repairing, assembling, and other relatively fixed processes. But with assembly, if you do not follow the manual, it will basically be a mess wherever you go. So first, what is currently underway is the vehicle's exterior, which is the assembly process for the car shell. Here, a magnet is being installed onto the trunk frame. It will work with another magnet on the door later to form a magnetic locking system used to close and secure the doors on both sides. Also, in some necessary areas, some crossbars will be added to this model car to enhance the rigidity of the vehicle. Now, speaking of rigidity, this brings up a difference that many people easily overlook. That is, a real GT-R has a unibody chassis. In other words, its roof, a pillar, B-pillar, C-pillar, and the floor under your feet are actually not just an outer shell, but a part of the whole car's structure. Thus, the engine, subframe, and suspension system will all be installed and fixed onto this steel framework. Therefore, for real machinery, the car body is not just a layer of clothing put on at the very end. Quite the opposite. It is actually one of the most core parts of the entire vehicle. But the model being assembled here is very different. It is more like a traditional body-on-frame chassis. What needs to bear various torques and stresses is the metal chassis that will be installed later. That is to say, components like the suspension system, steering mechanism, differential, drive shaft, gearbox, and so on will all be directly installed onto that metal chassis afterward. To sum it up in one sentence, wherever the power is transmitted, the load will naturally be transmitted there as well. So this also indicates that the car shell part Brother Shu is assembling serves more for decoration and replication. And in order to better replicate this, R34 version of the GT-R released in 1999. Brother Shu will recreate the nostalgia of those years in many places. For instance, the yellow warning lights seen at the beginning and these interior parts that have been repainted. The piece taken out just now is the steering wheel drive servo. By the way, this servo is not actually responsible for the vehicle's actual steering. It is purely responsible for turning the steering wheel. So it comes back to the point we just mentioned. Even if you cut off everything above the waist of this car and leave only the chassis, it can still run around flexibly. After that, the entire center console section can be installed. Next, install the assembled rear bumper section that features the GT-R's iconic 4-round taillights into place. The next step is the turn for these two doors. First, Brother Shu will install two hinges onto them respectively to fix them to the car frame. As for the door trim panels, they need to be sprayed with a decorative paint finish that gives a more retro feel and matches the exterior blue. By the way, the window glass is installed on the doors here, and it can be adjusted up and down. However, it needs to be done by hand, directly. As for the magnet here, its function was already mentioned at the beginning, which is to lock the door. It also includes two highly detailed fog lights. Next up is the trunk lid, which features a massive wing. Its assembly is relatively simple. Aside from the paint finish on the interior panel needing some adjustment, the other parts can be installed directly. Of course, here, Brother Shu applied a more retro matte black paint to all the visible black interior sections. The front and rear windshields as well as the wipers here are all glued and fixed using super glue. For this front bumper, besides applying the corresponding paint finish, Brother Shu will also give it a wash treatment to enhance its three-dimensional effect. Finally, install the hood that features two nozzles. With that, the body and exterior section of the vehicle can be considered complete for now. Next to be assembled is the steering drive servo section, which is actually used to control the vehicle's steering, and inside the front end of the servo, there is a gear set like this. When we see a large gear driving a small gear, I believe everyone who has studied middle school physics knows clearly that this is an acceleration movement. This also shows that this servo does not lack torque, but rather pursues a faster steering speed. Such a configuration can also indirectly indicate that this GT-R is an RC car specifically built for drifting. After all, compared to normal driving, drifting requires more frequent corrections to the front wheels. Therefore, many drift RCs will specifically amplify the servo output even further, thereby making the wheel steering more responsive. Next to be assembled is the vehicle's front wheel suspension part. And from the style of this upper control arm, you can probably guess that this car uses a double wishbone suspension. However, based on the assembly progress here, only the upper part of the suspension will be assembled at this stage. It will be fully completed later on. What comes as a surprise is that this tiny shock absorber is actually hydraulic. After bleeding the air from the oil, this tiny shock absorber can be assembled into place. In addition, Xiaomi also looked into it, and it seems that current RC cars all use this kind of shock absorber. Well, look at that. It is much more advanced than my Yadia scooter. This is the power core of the vehicle. A brushless motor with a 330 kV rating. As for the 3652 model number, the first two digits represent the motor's diameter, and the last two represent the motor's length. Generally, the larger the motor size, the greater the torque, and the better the heat dissipation. And without a doubt, the numerous gears connected above the motor make up the gear set of the gearbox. By changing the different gear ratios, the output speed and torque will be altered. By the way, the kV value on the motor represents the no-load RPM per volt of input voltage. The higher this kV value, the faster the RPM and the smaller the torque. Conversely, the slower the RPM, the greater the torque. Additionally, there is a distinction between inner and outer rotors for this motor. We won't go into detail about that. We just need to know that most RC cars use inner rotors. And here on the housing of the engine, there's another small servo. Judging from the linkage it connects to, it's clear to us that it is used to control the gear positions of the vehicle's gearbox. Now, I believe everyone is very familiar with this part. It is the differential, and its function is to allow the left and right wheels to rotate at different speeds, thereby allowing the vehicle to complete turns more smoothly. So this model is the same as the real R34, as it is equipped with independent front and rear differentials. Of course, friends who are familiar with the GT-R all know that Nissan also equipped it with an Atessa EDS Pro 4-wheel drive system. This system actively distributes power between the front and rear axles through an electronically controlled multi-plate clutch. From a functional standpoint, it can be said to take on the role of a center differential. And this center differential is extremely important for a true full-time 4-wheel drive system, because we all know that the front and rear differentials are used to coordinate the rotational speeds of the left and right wheels, whereas the center differential is responsible for coordinating the front and rear axles. It is just that on the GT-R here, an electronic system is used instead. Therefore, many people will also call the GT-R's layout a triple differential 4-wheel drive layout. However, on this car model, the electronic differential cannot be replicated. But these two cool turbos can be represented in the form of decorative pieces. At this point, the engine, which is 80% complete, can be installed onto the chassis. These two parts that have undergone special paint treatment are naturally the air filters. And what is being installed right now is the intercooler. After all, what is mounted here is a twin turbocharged engine. And after there goes through turbocharging. Although the total amount of oxygen increases, the temperature will also rise sharply. So, the engineers added an intercooler here. And at this moment, Brother Shu is also assembling the rest of the suspension parts, such as the axle shafts and steering knuckles, into place one by one. And here, there is also the most important piece, which is the steering linkage located at the front. This part will connect together with the actual steering servo installed earlier, and this real servo will link up with the fake steering wheel servo, thereby achieving synchronized steering. Now, the brake parts being installed here are actually just decorative pieces too. After all, the biggest difference from the mechanical brakes of real cars is that NRC models braking relies almost entirely on the electronic speed controller, which is the ESC. What you see next is the rear axle assembly. This section also features a differential and double wishbone suspension on both the left and right sides. This is the center drive shaft. The engine precisely uses it to transfer power to the rear axle. This time, after installing the entire exhaust pipe finished with a retro texture, we can proceed to install the previously mentioned electronic speed controller. This black box equipped with a cooling fan is the power hub of the entire model. Its operations cover the vehicle's throttle control, power output, reverse control, braking functions, and so on. But as for which specific control commands to execute, it still needs to be paired with a controller like this. Furthermore, this is a high-end controller. It is like a small computer, not only displaying battery signals, steering, throttle, braking, and various other parameters in real time, but also supporting direct adjustments. As long as you have the receiver connected, you can directly use the controller to issue the corresponding commands. Next up is what could be called Brother Shu's signature routine, which is covering the vehicle's interior floor panel with a layer of felt. Next, install the seats painted in the matching finish, and then Brother Shu can assemble the entire interior floor section onto the metal base. As for the gear shifter here, it is connected to the linkage of the engine and gearbox. In other words, when shifting gears, it will move in sync as well. After the four wheels are installed, combine the car body with the base. With that, this meticulous fully functional GT-R R34 model car is officially assembled and completed. That is all for our satisfying video this week. Thank you all for watching. West Ovation from the creative world wishes everyone bye-bye. Once again, thank you all for coming to Max's Restoration World. Bye-bye.